You got an interesting thing today, victim or survivor. What's the difference?
Well, you know, we did this show, I don't know, 6 months, 8 months ago.
Yeah.
For the first time that I'd ever done this, and I had so many requests for the information again. I just thought we'd do it again.
Okay.
Evidently, people really wanted to know, and I got a lot of requests for the lists that we're going to go through here today. And so, we, you know, look, everybody, one thing I think is common among every human being who's ever lived in the entire known universe, one common denominator we have is hurt or injustice. No human has ever been able to escape it. Everyone's experienced it. So, when someone does an injustice to you, what are you going to do? Okay, how you handle that injustice will change the end game of your life. Okay, so many people go into what we call a victim stance. They become a victim of that trauma. Now, is it true that they're a victim? Absolutely. My father victimized me with trauma. I was a victim. But what I don't want to do is continue the rest of my life in the state of a victim. Okay? Some people come to a place, and I believe this is where God has led me, to being what I would call a survivor. I was traumatized. It did affect me. I do have the scars emotionally, mentally, of the reality of what I went through. But I'm not living in that trauma. I've worked through it. I've faced it. I've dealt with it. And now I'm on the other side of it, where it's now part of my asset. It's part of my, it's not a liability anymore. It's a springboard. So it really helps me to help people. But what we see a lot in counseling, I see a lot, is people who are stuck in this idea that they're victimized. And here's the main reason why, Perry. And I want to say this real clearly. You hear the word victim thrown around in our culture. I'm not throwing it around as a negative. I'm throwing it around as an identifier. It's to identify what's happening with you, not to judge you. Okay, first, just be clear about that. This is in no way, shape, or form any sort of judgment. It's a way to try to identify the dynamics that are going on and help you get past it. So everybody who's ever been traumatized, I have seen, and I believe this to be true, has every abuser, regardless of what kind, whether it's mild or severe, sends a message that you're at fault.
Really?
So if the abuser was taking responsibility, they probably wouldn't be abusing people. So they have to blame their victim to justify their actions.
You're the reason that I'm doing this?
Yes. And if you tell somebody, I'm going to hurt your family. If you tell somebody, so there's always a threat and there's always a blame. And even if the person doesn't outright blame the person, if the person's young and they're being victimized, they're going to automatically blame themselves.
Can I ask you a question here?
Yeah.
Fast forward just for a moment. I don't want to spend a whole lot of time there. The whole Sadusky trials all over the news.
Oh my gosh.
Is that what he did?
Yeah. I mean, look at the entire system of denial that was built.
Unbelievable.
At Penn State.
All the way up to the president of the university.
Yeah, and everybody involved knew what was going on. There was plenty of people being exposed.
Unbelievable.
So they can't take responsibility, so they blame everybody. They blame everybody but the perpetrator. And you see it when he talks. He's like almost like, I can't believe this, you know. Yeah. I was a good guy. Abusers have to believe their own denial. That's how it continues.
That's how sick it is.
Yes. So here's the thing.
Yeah.
So every time someone's abused, and again, I want to make sure that you understand, it doesn't mean that somebody's being sexually abused or beaten. You can be abandoned. You can be neglected. You can be mistreated. It really, abuse is in the eyes of the beholder. It's not in the people standing around watching. So with abuse comes a message that you are no good. You're not worth anything. You're defective. You're less than. You're worth being abused. Now, that is the key component to remaining a victim. Okay? So when people start to become survivors, and we'll see it later, what they do is through the gospel, and it's my strong belief that the love of God to a victim, to somebody who's been traumatized, is the thing.
The only thing.
The singular thing, the only thing that can change that message from I'm worthless, no good, you know, piece of trash, to
I have value.
I have value. Okay, so that's the key reality here. But what I wanted to do is go through 10 things that you could see in someone that is in the victim status. And I will go through those first 10 things, maybe in the first half here of the hour, and then the second half of the hour we can spend on what it looks like when you become a survivor.
All right, let me just say you're more than welcome to join us. Our phone number is 7765368. Let me ask you one thing before you go down through that list. Why is it that victims want to get out of that state? They want to be made valuable. I mean, everything we want to do to help them, they want.
Right.
But they're afraid to go there because they're more familiar with where they are than where they're going. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I think the underlying that even more profoundly is they don't believe they deserve it.
Wow. So it's a
self-image
thing, huh?
It's a self-defeating thought process. So if I believe I'm no good, how am I going to have a sustainable motive to endure the difficulty of change?
What a circular, perpetrating, it's perpetual mess.
It is. And so let me tell you this also, and this is, I think, something we really need to, in the church, do a better job of. Now, the Scripture says that Satan is the father of lies. Okay, so I personally believe that is his most profound influence on us, is his lie. See, the main lie that I see him propagating is about your value. So if you believe you're no good, you're worthless, you're a piece of junk, you're, defective, less than, if you believe that, who's driving your boat?
Satan is.
His lie that you're no good, even though you were abused, even though you were neglected, does not change the value that God has for you. So it says that Satan is the accuser of the brethren, right? So he uses lies about your value, to accuse you. And this is why I think it's really important for us as believers to really encourage each other in the gospel truth, that God is indeed aware of what happened. He knows everything that happened to me, and He was present. He's going to redeem. He paid a price to save me from hell, to change the lie. Okay? That gospel truth is the core power for the change here. It's not to better my life. People don't have the stamina to do it that way.
All right, let's go through these 10 signs. 10 signs. Now, whether you're a victim or a survivor, and you're probably thinking, well, I hope I'm a survivor.
Yeah.
But you may still be a victim. So listen carefully to these 10 things, and then we'll get into the survivor point.
That's a good point, Perry, because sometimes you could be a little bit of both. You could be really a victim in one area of your life about one circumstance, and maybe gotten over another one, and be more in a survivor stance.
Well, let me one other point here. Is self-confidence and image, is that a key indicator here?
Yeah, I like to change the terminology from self-confidence or self-esteem to your value. What's your value? Where does your value come from? Where do you get your value? Does your value come from out there, my circumstances, getting things arranged in a way that I like, or people liking me? If your value comes from an outside source, you're going to be in trouble.
So like you're looking for approval in all the wrong places.
Exactly, or you're working hard, or you're getting loaded, or you're promiscuous, or you're being religious, but if the value doesn't come spiritually from God to you, then it doesn't have transforming power.
All right, let's get into this list here.
Okay, 10 signs you're a victim. Number 1, you complain rather than act. You ever seen that?
Well, yeah. I'm trying to think how I would respond to that. But
so people who just continually talk about it, but you never see any action.
Okay, so they actually talk about the abuser, too.
Yeah, they talk about everything. But they never take a step of action toward any sort of healing. They even would go to counseling, but they just keep talking. They don't actually take a step. And so here's the reason. The reason why is because they believe the lie that they're supposed to be in this place. They're not conscious of that. But this is a behavior you can look at and see. They complain, but they don't act.
Is it also because they don't have a place to go?
Sometimes. But even if they did, until that value question changes, they're going to stay spinning.
All right. Number 2.
Number 2, you talk about the same problems over and over and over again. Again, nothing changing. Just cycling. You hear somebody, 2 years ago we talked about that, and they talked about the same thing. It's like a perpetual problem and doesn't move. That's a sign you're stuck in the victim status. Right. Number 3, you're never able to get to resolution.
Well, how can you if you're this sick?
Well, if you're that stuck, exactly. But see, getting to resolution is one of the things we're all working for, right? We want to resolve these problems. And so what I've seen a lot is that people who are in a victim status, even though they have the tools and or the resources to get there, they never do. They sabotage themselves. They give up at the right moment because they don't believe they're worth it. So they sabotage the process and keep talking. So, number 4, you're always looking to people to save you.
How does that show up?
So, like in a church, the typical thing would be the 20% of the people get 80% of the attention from the pastors. It's the people who eat up the resources of time and energy of people who are helpers, and everybody else is like trying to live their lives. But these people are always in the office. They're always getting counseling. They're always getting help. Okay, that's how it looks. They eat up resources. They eat up people's time. They're looking to people to save you. If I could just talk to that person, then I would be better. Well, listen, no person can save you. This reminds me of something else I wanted to say. What do victims need, Perry?
Well, they need healing, but they need space, I think.
What they think is they need rescue.
Don't they?
No. They need power.
Well, I missed one.
So victims think they need rescue, but I'm saying what they need is power. And that power comes from God, not from me as a helper, not from the church, not from my family. Now, those people might be useful once I start seeing my value. Then they can help me. But as long as I'm spinning in that value question, probably not going to help me much. And so that leads me to number 5. You don't accept responsibility. There's always something or someone to blame.
Is that always a product of a victim? In other words, is it because they've been victimized, or could it be their own problems? I mean, their own...
Well, blame shifting, which is what this is common among a lot of people who are struggling. But if you're a victim, what happens is you never take any responsibility for changing your circumstances. Now, I'm not saying that the victim needs to take responsibility for the abuse, because obviously you were wrong. We're not talking about that. But now that that's over, you're not in that circumstance anymore, what are we going to do? They're always externalizing that. They're always pushing it out. Somebody's got to help me. They're not taking responsibility for what they're doing. And when we get to the survivor part, you'll see the contrast.
We're talking about victims and survivors and the injustice, whatever it is in your life. You may think you are a victim of injustice, and maybe you are a survivor of injustice. And as you said earlier, Patrick, this is something we all suffer with.
Yeah.
And it can be a one-time event. It could be an occurring event. It could be spousal abuse. It could have been, in your case, it was your dad when you were young. And the list goes on. It's amazing how these things shape us.
Yeah, they really do, though.
And they could be very subtle abuses. It could be verbal.
Yeah, it could be.
It could be just innuendos that put you down, I've seen that. I've seen where there's no physical. There really wasn't a whole lot of verbal, but there was a lot of innuendos that made you, that devalued you.
Exactly, and that kind of stuff is way worse than somebody hitting you in terms of healing. Because if somebody hits you, those are, but when they're just constantly sort of chipping away at you, that really gets under the surface and starts to embed itself. And those are much harder to deal with, in my experience, than somebody who's gotten hit.
All right, let me recap where we are. We're talking about the 10 signs of a victim. Sign 1, you complain rather than act. 2, you talk about the same problem over and over and over again. You never are able to get a resolution.
Right.
You are always looking to people to save you or to rescue you out of this. And then the last one we talked about, you don't accept, well, this is one you want to talk about now.
You want to move to 6.
Okay, you don't accept responsibility. In other words, you're always something or someone to blame. And the number 6 is? You
take more than you give. And I would say that's more about people's time and effort. You always find...
Do they know that? Does a victim know they're taking...
Not usually. There's enough denial that they're just trying to get help. But the truth is they end up taking more energy than they give. And you know, that will. There's another one that relates to that as we go on down further. Number 7, you are uncomfortable with being emotionally well.
Okay, that was the question I asked earlier.
Yeah.
Why?
Well, because I believe I'm no good, worthless, and bad. So when I start to feel the value of somebody who's loved, it makes me uncomfortable. And it's not conscious. I mean, I spent so many years of my early life with this issue. Being people trying to love me, and particularly right after I got saved, people trying to actually love me, and I just was not going to have it.
Okay, were you defensive?
Oh yeah, and I was defensive in a very, you know, effective way. It wasn't overt, but I couldn't take in the fact that people actually love me. And that was hard. Because here's the thing. You know, I see this so much, Perry. It's kind of interesting. One of the hardest things I think I see people go through is being loved. Because naturally, as humans, you know, we're fallen.
Requires humility, doesn't it?
And that's the problem, is that when I'm loved, the key component of me being loved is I become vulnerable. And survivors, I mean victims, that's their number one rule. Don't become vulnerable again, because you'll get hurt. That makes sense. That's a logical reality. If I'm vulnerable, I'll get hurt, because look at all the stuff that happened to me. Well, you know, when I was growing up in my family, that was true. Being vulnerable meant I was going to get hurt. But I'm not in there. I'm not in that anymore. My dad's not here anymore. He died. I don't have to live in that rule system anymore. But it's hard for me to accept love, even to this day. It's hard for me to accept love because of those things. And that's the process of sanctification that God is taking me through, is restoring me and revealing His love to me. And I become comfortable with wellness and vulnerability.
Well, I got to think number 7, and I'm not the counselor here, but to me, when I bumped into this, number 7 is the hardest one to deal with, because they just can't. They want to be emotionally well, but they're afraid to become emotionally well.
Yeah, it's really real. And most of the time, what I see is it's not even conscious to them.
Yeah, so you kind of have to ask the question, then why are you here? Why are you going through? Why are you asking for help? Why are you doing all this? Why are you pounding on everybody's door? Why are you blaming, doing all this if you really don't want to get well?
But they do.
Okay, well.
Oh boy. What I'm saying is,
I'm glad God called you to do this.
That's the difficulty of it. And so when somebody's in my office and they're doing that, what I tend to do is try to help them see that those two sides, that they're doing two things at once that are folding in on each other. So I want to get well, but I'm sabotaging it. Mm-hmm. So, and when God starts to reveal that to a person, we start to see some real change. But it takes God's revelation, because it has to go beyond my mind. Your mind is not strong enough for this kind of stuff. So, number 8.
Can I ask you one other question?
Yeah, sure.
Do you ever ask a victim, what do you think wellness looks like?
Sure, yeah. I often want to get an idea what they're driving towards. And usually what that is circumstantial bliss. So I'm going to arrange my circumstances so my life is pleasant to me. Okay. Well, no. Do you have that power? I want to meet the person that's got that power, because I want that power. I want the power to arrange my life in such a way that it's blissful. I don't have that power. And no one does. Okay. So, you know, that's never going to be an outcome we're going to get. And God never promised that, which is another issue that we run into.
All right, number 8.
Number 8. You're in crisis more than not. Emotional crisis.
It's always something.
Exactly. Because I can't get to resolution. I can't let in the love. I'm looking for people to save me. So everything's a crisis. And there's levels. But you just feel that from the person, like, you know, the intensity level of their emotional, you know, undoing is pretty intense. So they're in crisis more than not. Number 9, you make people around you tired. I take it you've experienced this, Barry.
Really, counseling is exhausting. I don't think people know what it sucks out of you.
That's why I really believe it's a calling.
It has to be. I could never do
anything else. It's a calling because, see, this kind of stuff doesn't wear me out. It actually invigorates me.
Well, okay. I guess if I was to qualify, and I say this respectfully, but I was to qualify myself, I have a pastor's heart.
Yes, you do. I would agree.
All right, so I want to help.
Yeah, exactly.
I want to get it done.
Exactly.
And I also want to knock the lights out once in a while, snap out of it, you know. But I really, it is exhausting.
It is. Well, and see, this is why I think a lot of times counseling doesn't work very well for victims, because a lot of counselors don't understand the internal workings of the traumatic mindset. And I just happen to be blessed enough to have gone through it. So I have a lot of compassion. I love people that are stuck in this because I want to try to help. Now, are there times where I'm like, you know what? Have I ever, been like, I can't do this? Yeah. I mean, I'm a human being and I have limitations. But generally, when people start to see that you understand, the wall starts to come down a little bit.
Yeah.
And as it comes down, then they start to see, oh, I can live another way. I did trust that person and I didn't die. And we start to get a little momentum going the other way. But it's usually a long-term deal because they keep testing. They keep testing. And if you remain safe and you don't go, I'm sick of this, we might get to the other side.
Well, I think impatience is probably the one thing that's in our culture today that hinders us from getting full healing.
Yeah. Well, and the reality is our culture is impatient because we want everything now. We don't want to wait.
Yeah.
And as an addict, I can tell you, I certainly understand that reality that, waiting is next to, that's near hell.
Well, I just really think it's one of the problems.
Yeah.
Because people, I mean, a victim may want to get emotionally well, but they want a pill.
Yeah.
And have it all go away.
Or they want me to say the magic words,
yeah,
or they want the circumstances to magically disappear, or whatever.
All right, number 9.
Number 9 was you make people around you tired.
All right.
Number 10, you tend to harm others rather than show mercy.
Do they know that? Does the victim know they're harming people?
No.
How do they harm them?
They're wearing them out.
Yeah.
They're wearing them out. They're not usually doing active things that are hurtful, but they are hurting people by their constant need of attention, their constant need of counseling, their constant need of help. They're just always spinning.
Does the victim have order in their life?
Some can have order, but generally no. I would say the general rule is no. And when I say order, I mean order in the sense that it leads to good, healthy living.
I was going to say their life is scheduled, that maybe their homes are somewhat neat.
Yeah.
I mean, that's usually not the case.
That's generally not the case because they spend so much time in their mind thinking about their issues. Now, I have seen people who are highly, like OCD, who are victims. So, there's everything's clean and everything's got its place, but don't move it.
Okay. Yeah. No, I get that one.
So that's an extreme side of the other side.
But the other one is, I mean, part of this is there's no organization in this person for the most part.
Yeah, I would say
they're pretty scattered. They're living from one crisis to the next.
Yeah, emotionally speaking. Right. They may have a decent, their home may look okay, but generally speaking, it's going to be more on the side of chaos. Generally speaking, I just want to let people know that just if you have a chaotic home and you're not very organized, doesn't automatically mean you're a victim.
Okay, we're going to get into what it is to be a survivor in just a moment, but just kind of highlighting the victim thing. I want to put this in perspective because if you are self-analyzing yourself and you say, well, I'm a victim, that kind of fits into the self-pity, I got a problem, I need help. I mean, isn't that somewhat compounding?
It is. It is. So what I want people to do is be able to identify the behavior and then ask the question. Ask the question of somebody around you who you talk, do I wear you out?
Can you handle the answer?
Yeah. Well, see, that's just it. I mean, do you find that I'm always spinning? Do you feel like I can never get to resolution? Ask around. And if you have people in your life that love you, they'll tell you. And the fact that you would ask the question tells me you're on the road to being a survivor. And listen, I want to say one other thing to folks. Listen, there's no one out there who cannot move from victim to survivor Everyone, because of God's mercy, is capable of making the transition. And so there's hope. A lot of times I talk to victims, and one of the things they say is that, well, there's no hope. I can't change. I've tried, and nothing ever works. And no. Well, listen, I'm sitting here as proof that you can change. I spent many years of my life in this victim's role, and I'm not there anymore by God's mercy, not because I did everything right. So it's not about you doing everything right. It's about you trusting God and developing that relationship. And then, as we see in the survivor's role, we'll see how that translates into you getting a more healthy life.